Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me, as always, is Tara.
Greetings, citizens.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. We get together, we've watched the movie, and we will talk about it. It really is quite that simple. And it is coming to an end of 70s season number 3. This is the third time we've done this, where we've done a batch of 70s movies over a month or so. And this is Silent Running, which was a movie that's kind of dodged up the previous seasons, and it felt right to finally get this in, because it's, you know, outside of the top tier of sci-fi movies from the 70s, Silent Running tends to be one of the sort of next tier down that gets mentioned a lot, and people were asking about it. So we're going to start spoiler free. We'll give you a warning before we get to spoilers, and I'll give you the general premise. But this was a first time watch for you, right?
It was.
Yes, Bruce Dern in here, long before he was just the racist old dude in Hateful Eight, which is, I think, what I think of him from first.
One of my favorites.
Although he's also in The Burbs, which I really like a lot, which is kind of in between this, I don't know, prime of his life phase and then his old man phase. So when he's I don't know.
Yeah, because he did Nebraska right before the Hateful Eight, right? Wasn't that like an Academy Award nominated film?
I don't know. I never saw it.
Oh. Okay.
I've disappointed Tara with my lack of Nebraska viewing. So the premise of Silent Running is that it's in the future and we're in space. Bruce Dern plays a character named Lowell, who is basically the botanist on a ship that has 6 biodomes, which are effectively the last forest of any kind that we have. Earth no longer has a forest. I feel like we'll discuss the details of because the details they drop about Earth in this are really probably warrant some discussion and some thought. But I think that's maybe I don't know if I'd say it's ultra spoilery, but I think we should save it for spoilers, just in terms of that stuff. But ultimately, he believes it's important to keep this stuff going, to have fruit and vegetables and some a place for bunnies to hop around in. We see bunnies hopping around in these little forests. And ultimately, though, they're told by the government/company that they are to nuke all of the biodomes and return this vessel, which is supposed to be just a cargo vessel or something, really, back to active duty, so that it's not being used up. This is worthless. It's taking resources. We don't need it. And yeah, Bruce Dern has a problem with this. He's like, not on my watch. And he goes on into business for himself, one might say. To use a wrestling term, he goes into business for himself. And the rest of the film is about him trying to sort of save the forest, and with the help of a few little robots that help maintain the ship. So that's the basic premise of Silent Running. So Tara, what did you think of Silent Running?
So yeah, first time watch for me. I think this movie is good. I think it's good.
But
I like it.
But
there are some things I find a bit confusing.
There was a tone there that implied to me there was going to be a but, possibly a however, or maybe something else. But
well, yeah, I mean, I'm not in love with the film. I like the premise and I like the setup and I like the idea of preserving nature and, the cost of nuking these forests and changing our way of life into technology. I do think the movie goes in a direction that I think is a bit confusing, to whatever its message is trying to be. I just thought there would be more of the actual biodome part of it. But that's more in the setup of the film, which is the part I like the most.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of similar to you in that I kind of like the vibe it's going for. I like the ideas and the messaging that, well, at least the messaging that I think that it's going for. I kind of agree that it's a little bit murky as it goes on, exactly what it's saying. I kind of like the sets and all that. A bit of trivia here: they actually shot a lot of this on a decommissioned aircraft carrier. They didn't build a lot of it. And I believe it was a Korean aircraft carrier that had been like.
Well, no, it's an American one because it has an American name. It's the same name as the actual station or ship, whatever this is.
Okay, I'm sure I saw something. Maybe it was used in the Korean.
Used in Korean War.
Maybe that's what it was. Maybe that's what I read. But so there's obviously the biodome part. I assume was just a set because I don't see how they're going to put that onto an aircraft carrier. But the rest of it is like just them sort of retrofitting this old ship, which is fun. It's a nice cost effective thing. I liked kind of the feel of it because of that. I will say Bruce Dern's character as a protagonist is a little hard to kind of get a clear grasp of in terms of like emotionally connecting to him and rooting for him. It's kind of difficult, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because he does make choices that are obviously extreme and they're not just likable choices, and you have to kind of reconcile that. I don't know if the movie goes as full into like him dealing with the morality of what he's done enough for me to really see that as like a core like story that it's trying to tell. It feels a little bit, I don't know, a little bit light on those things where it's like it kind of addresses them, it approaches them, and it kind of brings them up, and there's a couple of moments here or there that harken to it, but it doesn't feel like it goes into like a full on, no, this is a character who makes these choices and then has to deal with those choices. It feels a bit more, I don't know, just reserved.
You're right. Like, I don't want to say too much because it might be leaning into, spoiler section, but he is a difficult character to root for. The movie doesn't really do very much to make you root for this guy or even make you root against other people, you know?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. This is the weird thing. Obviously, it's this environmental message, and he's obviously pro a lot of things, right? Which you think, it'd be easy to like format the movie so that we sympathize with all of his plights, but we are given a lot of good arguments from other characters as to why it's not that big a deal, and we're given a lot of reasons, and it's not so much that I necessarily agree with them, but it's like, okay, but then the argument could be, but when he talks about these forests, he's like, well, yes, but then we don't have beauty, we don't have art, we don't have freedom or frontiers to explore because all these natural things are gone. And that's a valid like argument, but it's a bit more of an artistic argument as opposed to a we need this for sustainability argument. And it kind of, it's like, okay, we'll go into that then. Like, let me explore this idea of like the romance of it and why we need to preserve it for those reasons. But the movie kind of doesn't. And I think Bruce Dern at times is a little, I don't want to say annoying, but there are moments where he's just a little bit quirky in a way that is hard to kind of get behind.
He kind of comes off as crazy, like right from the beginning. Not like too crazy, but like he's clearly an outcast on this station itself. And it's probably because he doesn't really think highly of the people he's with. So he just sort of like isolates himself in his own little biodome.
Joe's funny is he kind of comes across, now you've described him that way, he kind of, Joe, like, when people think of like the extreme person in a group who's always going on about like issues or social issues or environmental issues, and they kind of joke about them like always bringing it up and like being like the, like this is kind of what this guy is. He's in this movie. He's.
Are you saying he's the vegan in the group?
I'm trying to avoid that word, but that's kind of like. But in this case, he actually is the extreme version that people joke about their vegan friends, right? Mm-hmm. He actually is like getting into like debates with them. He's kind of separating himself from the other characters. He is kind of like this unlikable guy, and there's the one guy who does try to like be friendly with him, and he's trying his best to like an olive branch is maybe an ironic thing to use as a metaphor here, but he keeps resisting it. He keeps, and part of what I thought this was going to go, and it does kind of to a point, but part of what I thought this was going to do was a little bit of that into the wild kind of message. I thought there was going to be a little bit of a, you have to appreciate humanity as well as as the wildlife. Like you have to kind of need a bit of both. for a healthy balance, and it does kind of do a little bit of that, but but again, it felt kind of like it was. We say that's about a lot of these 70s movies where it feels like it doesn't go all in on some of its ideas. It feels like it kind of broaches them, and
yeah, and also like I thought the message of the film was pretty clear in the beginning, but as the movie went on, it just I don't know what Bruce Dern's motivation is anymore.
I mean, I've got some ideas, but we can, spoiler talk.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, this is a really nitpicky one, right? This is not a serious complaint, really, but it kind of annoyed me that he looks like a race car driver because he's got so many patches on his like suit. It looks like he's. I mean, I know it's like like scout badges almost that he's wearing all over, but
I think he's really proud of the work he does.
Yeah. But it made it look like he was getting ready to get into like a Formula One car. And like at any point, he was going to put on a helmet.
I thought that this movie looked a lot like the set of Mystery Science Theater 3000. They got the jumpsuits, they got the colors, the two robots.
I mean, to be fair, I don't think it's a wild speculation to say that Mystery Science Theater might be inspired somewhat by the design of this movie.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, have you heard them say that, or are you just not? Definitely it's because you're watching it.
It's in the trivia, but also
Okay.
like I've heard it before in the behind the scenes stuff on all my DVD extras.
Yes, and funnily enough, there's a sequence in this that made me think of a movie that I watched on Mystery Science Theater 3000. The little buggies.
Me too.
Yeah, the little buggies from Space Mutiny are clearly inspired by this movie because like they have these little RV things.
I believe they're called enforcers, and they reach speeds of 3, which leads to some wild chases.
Just to be specific here, that's in not in Silent Run. That's in Space Mutiny. They're called enforcers. Yes.
These are like a big wheel for kids. Kinda.
I mean, they seem to have enough fun like driving around in them.
Yeah, that's true. They did look like fun.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, this is fair. And there's a nice touch at the start actually because it starts off with all these tranquil shots of like close-ups of leaves and bugs and like just here's nature, and then eventually you just hear the engine.
A turtle.
And these like RV things like interfere. It's like no, look here's man's world coming to an interfere and like trample over the natural beauty of this. But then even this forest though is like the backdrop of it is like a dome and then it's just space. So there is like kind of a nice visual of having like
it's
this.
very pretty, yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice contrast. It's unique.
Yeah,
so.
It's a lot like those retro futurism art prints that you can purchase where it's just like people in a crowd, but that crowd is on a moon by Saturn or something.
Yeah, I think to sum up like my overall feeling in this movie, I think I like the idea of it, and I think I like talking about what it is more than I like the experience of watching it from start to finish. Does that feel fair?
I like the movie. I think the movie's good. I also agree that I'm a little iffy on the protagonist. I do think Bruce Dern is a great actor, but I don't think he's a very likable person on screen. And I don't know if it's his fault or if it's just the way the character is written. But there wasn't a lot for me to hold on to there. And I think that, but I do really like the look of the movie a lot, and I do like the setup of the film.
Yeah, just imagine Red Brown in this role; it'd be so much better.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, that works in literally every case, though.
I mean, in all seriousness, there's definitely actors that I think if you look, and it's not that Bruce Dern's bad, but I think there's like with this type of character, you want someone who naturally has a little bit of like likableness to them, to like make you empathize with them a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I don't know who I'd have off the top of my head, but like there's definitely actors that I wouldn't put in here. Like I wouldn't put I wouldn't put Christopher Walken in this role because I think Christopher Walken would have more of the same problem where he's just a little bit too edgy, and he would just feel a bit too off kilter. But if you put, say, I don't know, Tom Hanks, maybe?
Sam Richardson. Sam Richardson's always likable.
Okay. It would turn into a comedy though with him, as I'm worried.
He is hilarious.
He's maybe a bit too on the funny side for it to work. But
I mean, I know he's a promising young woman and he's not that likable in that, but
sure, yeah.
The reason he's in that is because the director purposely hired male actors who are known for being likable, and put them in those roles.
Yeah, because it's him and Bo Burnham, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who's like a really likable dude, generally speaking.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and a great director. Eighth Grade is a fantastic movie. It's not sci-fi, but I recommend it.
I haven't seen Inside. I heard that's good.
I heard it was good, although I heard it was a bit of a weird like trip through his mental state. People were worried about him afterwards. Yeah, so
well, great art will do that to a person. So I've heard.
So you have yeah. I mean, the little robots obviously are decent enough. They're a bit schlocky in their design. Like you can sort of look at their arms and it's like, okay, that's just, you can sort of tell the type of tubing that they've used to make these robots. You can sort of like, you can go and buy that in like a hardware store. You can, like, this is the arm.
I was trying to figure out how they worked because they're an odd like boxy shape.
Oh, do you not know how they worked?
Well, I know that there's people inside them, and but I was still looking at the legs of them. Like those look like arms. They don't look like legs, and they are arms.
They are
arms.
Yeah.
They hired like multi like quadriplegic or paraplegic people.
Yeah, I was looking for the right word there.
Yeah.
Okay. You got there in the end. I got there. Yeah. That's basically the trick to it, is that it's just, it's people who would fit into this type of role, by and large. And they're an important part of the film because it's not a big cast. Other than a couple of voices on a comms, you've got the main character, you got 3 other crew members, and then you've got the robots. So that's who is left. So
I think that the robots are really great in this. I think they have enough personality that I like them. Mm-hmm. Like they seem to have emotions and empathy, especially when one of their fallen, when their brethren have fallen, they seem to be distraught about it or are hurt. And I love that they don't talk because that would have easily made it annoying and cheap, and I would have hated it.
They could have R2'd it with a beep beep bloop.
Yeah, I would have been okay. There's a little bit of like noises that come out of them sometimes, but it's pretty few and far between.
Yeah. Yeah. No, robots are fine. I think the sad part, this is one of these movies where I look at the poster and go, this looks really cool. And then the movie is not quite as cool as I think the poster made it look.
Well, the robots suffer from that 70s movie thing where they're just super bulky and very slow. They're given all these complicated tasks like performing surgery. And you're like, there's no way this thing that is like janky is going to perform surgery.
I wouldn't feel comfortable trusting it, no.
We're just going to cut away and come back and boom, surgery's done. It looks like it takes them 8 years to like walk across the station.
The funny thing is that so in the rec room on the ship there's a pool table, but because it's the future, it's a circular pool table, and the only pocket is in this weird. It's
future pool.
But the only pocket is this one weird hole, and it's like it's not even like right in the middle. It's like off center. It's like like a third of the way in the middle. And I thought, this is really weird, and this is just different for the sake of being different, seemingly. But what really
why would they have to change pool?
Yeah, and the part that really cracked me up about it though is they've got like a robot arm that will come in and like set up the balls, and there's a scene like halfway through when Bruce Dern's waiting for it to like set up the balls and rack them, and it's like picking the balls up from like the outside the table one by one, and I'm like, this is a clear example of it is quicker to just grab them yourself because this thing is taking forever.
Yes.
It's like
it reminds me of it also reminds me of in Demon Seed, not Proteus, but
great
like
movie.
the
Great
chair.
Movie. I know, Demon Seed's great.
Demon Seed's great. And not Proteus, and not the weird like geometrical thing he becomes, but like the chair, the assistant chair with the robot arm and like the head strap that would miraculously like pick a person up with one like super weak arm and strap him in and put the head thing over them, and is able to do all these complex tasks that we don't see, because every time we see the robot try to do something, it takes like 6 hours and it's super janky and clunky.
I mean, I feel like Doctor Who has been for 50 years, because obviously that started back in the 60s, 70s when things were just as clunky as this, and for 50, 60 years they've had to gradually try and sort of retcon the Daleks so that they work in the modern story because they're just they're just boxes that move around. That's all they are.
Yeah, I've seen them. Yeah, they look like big chess pawns.
Yeah, there was a big
they
thing.
They don't look very threatening.
When the show came back,
I'm sure they're very scary.
For the big relaunch in 2005, the first time they had a Dalek episode, there was a whole big deal at the fact because it used to be a thing where they couldn't go upstairs, so that was like a big weakness. Is they couldn't go upstairs, but in the new version they could hover upstairs. And it was like a big old shit moment. It's like, oh, now they've got mobility.
It's like when the zombies could run all of a sudden.
Yeah, I think. Let's be honest, Daleks are pretty lame, and Doctor Who fans don't like when you make fun of Daleks, but they're pretty lame.
I've never watched Doctor Who. Well, that's not true. I tried watching one of the seasons that a friend recommended, and wasn't for me.
There's good things occasionally in Doctor Who, but a lot of it's pretty lame.
I do think those weeping angels are like genuinely scary. They're cool.
Yeah. But I had to stop watching because too much of it was just kind of really schlocky in a way that
if I had discovered it when I was a kid, I don't know if I'd be into it, but I might be like more open to it.
Yeah. If I had this childhood like attachment to it, maybe I would like it more. Yeah. Barry, back to Silent Running. Which I feel like a lot of people do like this movie quite a bit, and I feel like a lot of people really were looking forward to us getting to it, and I don't want to. I was a little bit worried as I was watching it because I'd seen it once a long time ago, and I remembered being a little lukewarm and not being in love with it. Not hating it, but not being in love with it. And I was 40 minutes into this viewing, and I was like, this is all right, but I'm kind of feeling the same way that I did the first time, and I hope that like I have some reasonable points to make, and I have stuff that people understand why I feel the way I do, and it's not just. Because I'm not. I want to make this clear. Not for a second am I complaining that this is not some sci-fi action movie. That's not what it is. It never pretends to be that, and it never, tries to.
I just wanted it to be the movie it set up in the beginning.
Okay, I thought you were going to clarify what that was.
Well, not without spoilers.
Okay, not without spoilers. Okay. But yeah. All right, well, I guess we'll give the spoiler warning then, so we can start talking about everything. So full spoilers for Silent Running from here on out. You've been warned. All right, well, I'll ask the question again. What sort of movie does it set out to be at the start then? Go on.
Yeah, well, the beginning sets up like he's the only one who cares about the natural world, about how man has relied too much, and the way they talk about Earth, it sounds pretty beige, pretty boring. People have forgotten where they come from, like where health comes from.
But notably, it's functional though. That was the weird thing. That's different from a lot of other stories that's set, like in the future. And
it sounds like it's got its own little biodome thing, but it doesn't have any plants or anything.
It sounds air conditioned because they said it's 75 degrees no matter where you go.
It's definitely weather controlled of some type, or climate controlled.
They mention that no one's poor, no one's hungry, everyone's got a job. Like they set up this idea that it's actually kind of perfect, almost machine-like, right. But there's no wildlife, there's no trees, there's no forests.
Yeah,
those things are gone.
Right, and I think that's interesting setup. Like if your world was dying anyway, and it wasn't your fault, then okay, Earth sounds like it's still an okay place to be, but. Clearly it would have been better if we still had forests and wildlife, and we're not the only people on the planet. Obviously we're the most important, I do think that, but we do share this planet, and it sounds like the Earth in this world is basically just there for humans.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe livestock. Not sure.
I feel like there probably is still some animals, just because people would want to keep them around.
You just want kitty cats, and it'd be your perfect utopia, wouldn't it?
Well, this is the thing. This is what is actually quite interesting about this premise and the way it sets it up that makes it unique to other dystopian movies where it talks about climate change, or it talks about this is not a case where they're saying, oh, Earth is getting worse and worse and everyone's struggling and dying because there's not enough food, or because the atmosphere is becoming hostile to our systems. that no one. It's not that. It's like, no, everything's fine. Like we've actually through fabrication made sure that because I mean they don't say it outright, but they talk about the food being synthetic. It sounds a lot like Star Trek replicators by the sound of it. Like, you know, in
Yeah,
essence.
I mean, it seems more like he only eats fruit and stuff that he grows in the garden, but you know, everybody else is like, we can't eat that. We don't like that because we like our synthetic crackers and, you know, cheese in a tube or whatever it is.
Yeah, they're used to whatever it is. Which,
yeah, I mean, the stuff that's, you know, created to be much like processed food that we have now is just created to be make our brains go ding 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 and eat more of this stuff.
well,
and
no,
then,
you're making
and then regular food tastes bland.
You don't know that. You do not know that. You're making an assumption there because one of my thoughts I
Well,
had.
it looked like Ritz crackers that he threw around at one point.
It looks like that, but it like that doesn't mean like it's the future. Like if this is nutritionally like solid, like if this food that is designed for people in the future, much like Star Trek, because they say this in Star Trek, they've said this quite a few times, where you basically just order what you want in Star Trek, and it doesn't matter if it's like a greasy cheeseburger, it'll just nutritionally be okay. Like it'll still give you everything you need nutritionally, and that's fine.
Right. But they still have like overweight people in Star Trek, so well, I guess people still eat food.
They can eat too
make.
much. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you say, like I think there's like an episode where Riker's still making food the classic way because he wants to, because it's a hobby. So
yeah,
people can still get fat, but
Riker is a nice example of
yeah,
that,
Riker's an example. He gets a bit more portly as the years go on. No, but I guess what I'm saying is like
still looks fine.
In a pure clinical sense, like if everyone is well fed, there's no poverty, and all these things are dealt with. The movie asking the question then, but is there still something lost by not having this part of like the world? And I think I would agree the answer is yes. Now don't get me wrong, I think if it's between having like everyone's dealt with and it's everyone's like doesn't have to worry about all these problems, let's say if they were at odds against each other, I would say, well, pick the one that saves all the people, you know, bye forest. But in this context where it's no, this company or the government are just saying, you know what, it's not worth our effort to keep, we don't care anymore, but someone's fighting for the idea that no, we should keep this because it's beautiful and because there's a reason to cherish it. Like I actually do agree with that sentiment.
And we should be so selfish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if I am maybe, you know, compared to you, a little bit more towards, yeah, if everything could just be fabricated and like I wouldn't have to worry about this anymore, that'd be great. like part of me thinks like 90% of the time.
Say, this is definitely your version of Earth, so long as there's cats.
As long as there's some cats. Like on a cold hard logical sense, right, to put my Spock head on, like I'm okay with how Earth sounds, but I would still want there to be some real nature as well. Like I don't want it to be gone.
Yeah.
But I think that's what makes this debate more interesting in this film compared to, or at least more unique than other examples, is that it gives us this Earth that doesn't sound that bad. I mean, it sounds a bit boring maybe, but it doesn't sound like torture. I
agree. I actually think the movie kind of goes against its message later on, because they make Bruce Dern kind of unlikable almost from the beginning. Even though he seems like he has the right message, it's almost like the movie's trying to say, like, no, it's the hippie that's wrong. Yeah, he's the tree hugger that is the one that's the wrong, is in the wrong. Because I thought that was so confusing.
Yeah, because he's this outsider from the start, and he's kind of neurotic, and he kind of like, you know, snaps when he's saying, no, let me eat my fruit and let me eat my cantaloupe. He comes across a bit deranged when he's sitting there with his spoon, like, you know, just like carving out this fruit.
Yeah.
He kind of has that vibe right from the start. So I do think it kind of flips later in the film, where I can see the positive message by the end, and kind of like I think that the final of the movie does have like something it's trying to do and sort of compare itself to. So I'll when we get there, I'll talk about that. But
yeah,
at least early on,
Bruce Dern does one more unlikable act before the end. Also, we have to talk about.
Oh yes, I mean he does unlikable things quite a bit in this movie. I mean, well this is the thing. So early on in the film, they get this message. And they're told that they have to like detach the domes but plant nukes so that they blow up, and part of me was thinking, like, why'd you have to blow them up? Like, why can't you just let them drift? Just let them go into space? Like, really?
Yeah.
What's the big deal? So you can maybe argue there's maybe something there about just the disposability that they're being treated with is kind of an interesting topic.
I think so. Like, plus, Yeah, I think it's like the fact that they use nukes specifically tells me that they're trying to say, like, because this, came out at the time that it did, right after the 60s, and we got all those other anti-nuclear bomb episodes of Twilight Zone and movies that we've watched. It seems kind of like a remainder from that. Like, look, the nukes destroy more than just cities. They destroy natural habitats and forest and all this beauty that can get lost by us just going to war with one another.
Now, I don't know how small you can make a nuke, but they did feel a lot more compact in this movie than I've seen elsewhere.
That's the future.
Yeah, they look like thermostats, like you'd have your hot beverage in.
Right.
That's how big they were. I'm not even convinced that that's not what they made them out of in terms of like the props.
I think I saw the thermos symbol on the side of it.
Right, you gotta keep track. If you go above 3.6 on the old Ratagens, you gotta.
That's right. Not great, not terrible. But...
Yeah. Reactor 4, baby. You gotta keep track. So. Yes, so he doesn't want to do it, obviously, and he's just kind of upset as the others are like gradually like going into these various domes and setting up the nukes. They ultimately have gotten rid of 6 of them. There's a couple of neat little details along the way, like one of them gets cut in one of the forests, and he has to go to Bruce Dern for like help. So Bruce Dern's like, okay, I'll patch you up, and it's kind of this awkward thing, because this is like the guy who's been the biggest dick to him the whole time, but Bruce Dern's still willing to do his job, patch him up. But when there's only 2 domes left, and the guy who's been nice to him, the one in the red jumpsuit who's been nice to him, and it's a bit more sympathetic. He's like, I get that you care about this, but ultimately we want to go home. We've been out here for months, years even at this point, and like you just have to accept that this is not our choice. Like, we're just following orders. This is the choice of whoever's in charge. Bruce Dern ultimately
the dream is over.
He tries to make a stand, and he ends up fighting this guy to death. Right? He kills him.
Yeah.
And
chokes him.
Then this is in the heat of the moment, so obviously you don't like him for it, but you at least can accept it's in the heat of the moment. But then he actively makes the choice to go and jettison the other dome that has the other 2 crew members in it, and lets it blow up with them on board. So he murders the other 2 like in cold blood, right? Mm-hmm. Just outright. And okay, I'm like, he's done this very unlikable thing. He's went off the deep end, so it's hard to sympathize with the message that he's behind a little bit at this point, because he is doing these extreme things where he is placing his last forest, because he's only got 1 dome left at this point. He started with 6, now he's only got 1. He's placing this forest survival over the lives of other human beings, and at that point it's like, okay, especially the guy that he liked, because the guy that was nice to him, because the guy that was nice to him was the first one he killed. Mm-hmm. And it was almost like once he'd killed him, it was like, well, the other 2 don't seem as bad to him because they're the dickheads, right? So he's already crossed the line.
Crossed that threshold, yeah.
Yeah. So that all, like, okay, fine. So this is where I was thinking, okay, it's going to be Into the Wild. He's going to like achieve like this balance where he's taking care of the forest on his own, but ultimately he's going to feel lonely, and ultimately he's going to. And there is a couple of moments in the film where he has these little flashbacks where he remembers people, and obviously he teaches the robots later how to play poker because he needs companionship, and he talks to the robots like people more. He starts to give them personalities through his dialogue, and he's like, it sort of builds up over time.
It's like one of the first things he does.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, right, I get kind of what you're doing at this point, and this makes some sense. And we're kind of explaining this very quickly, but there's a lot of time this takes to happen. Between like him like running around and setting up the dome to eject, and then he talks over comms to the other ship that's nearby, who's like sort of like going to take them home basically.
Right.
And he sort of lies and says there's a problem, and like eventually takes the ship through the rings of Saturn, which interestingly, bit of trivia on this. So the director of this actually did effects on 2001.
Oh, cool.
And originally, apparently, Kubrick wanted to use Saturn instead of Jupiter, and they only chose Jupiter in the end because the either the effect couldn't be done or couldn't be done in time for the rings. So the director basically finished the work that he was doing for that and put it in this movie, kind of.
Oh, interesting.
So there's a little bit of a 2001 connection there, which
Love
is
it.
neat. I thought you'd like that.
I do.
But this all takes some time. There's a lot of him talking to them and lying to them, and eventually he says there's an explosion that killed the rest of the crew, and he's like terrified. And when he gets beyond Saturn, it's like, well, you're getting too far out now. There's not, like, the chances of us being able to come and get you now are slim. So this might be it. And it calls him a good American. Like, he's like, oh, we salute you for your service.
You're gonna have a high school named after you.
Did you just reference Deep Impact?
Wasn't that Armageddon?
No, I think it's Deep Impact. It's the one where the astronauts are all talking about how, well, this is a one-way trip, but at least we'll all have high schools named after us.
Yeah.
That's Deep Impact.
Then I guess I did.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I've seen Armageddon more than Deep Impact, so I'm not claiming.
I'll take your word for it.
I'm not claiming to be cool because I'm not as much of an Armageddon guy.
I've seen both of them once.
Honestly, it's worth. Maybe not the whole thing. You can get the clip on YouTube. There's a great clip of the commentary track that Ben Affleck did for Armageddon, where he says when he brought up to Michael Bay on set one day, hey, wouldn't it be easier to train astronauts how to drill than training drillers how to be astronauts? And apparently Michael Bay just said, F off, Ben. And I'm like, Ben's got a point.
The American way.
Ben's got a point.
Step aside.
Oh dear. I always just enjoy that little
That's
anecdote.
pretty funny.
I love the idea of Michael Bay just getting pissed off and said that someone's just pointed out the entire premise.
Super obvious.
Yes,
Flaw in the premise.
The entire premise is nonsense. Not to disparage, like, you know, this industrial drilling I'm sure takes a bit of training. There's a lot of, like, skill and trade involved in it, but
sure.
Astronauts take a long time to train.
They tend to only go for the best of the best of the best, you know.
Yes. Best of the best of the best, sir.
Correct.
Men in Black, 1997.
Okay. Don't need to go into your weird savant mode.
She said best of the best of the best. That's just what I thought of.
Yeah. I was clearly doing Men in Black.
Yeah, okay. We're on the same page. Yeah. So yes. So he ends up on the other side of Saturn, but he's injured, you know, when he get into the fight with a dude, like his leg got stabbed, basically.
I guess. I don't remember seeing that happen. I was wondering why he was like all wobbly when he was talking and kind of limping around. And then they show like a full body shot of him, like, oh my God, his leg's like about to fall off.
He's got blood, yeah.
There's so much tomato soup everywhere.
And I was thinking, oh, okay, so this is going to show how much he needs other people. But it just sort of like gets the droids to patch him up.
Yeah, he's got to put in the different floppy disk first.
Because there's 3 droids at this point. It's when they go through the rings of Saturn that one of them bites it. Number 3 bites it.
Yeah. Seemingly just on its own, it decides to die.
It's a suicidal droid.
Basically, like, because he kept saying, like, just keep going. Why have you stopped? And he just sort of like sits down and then dies. Like, did he just decide that life wasn't worth living anymore?
Yeah.
This poor droid had a existential crisis on the side of the ship.
Well, we see it later on. Bruce Dern runs one of them over by accident because he's not where he's supposed to be. Number 2 gets run over, and when he's operating on him to try and fix him, he asked number 1 to go and like fetch something, and he wants to stay by his side.
Yeah.
He wants to stay by his brother's side as he's been worked on. He's too concerned to leave the room, and Bruce Dern's like, I get it, my man.
Yeah, like they do a good job of giving the robots some, you know, personality and something for me to attach to and go, I like these, I want them to survive, I want them to be okay, to be taken care of. You know, it's like the Wilson thing in Castaway. This is very much like a Castaway prototype.
Yeah, a little bit. I think what I took from this part of the film is the irony that he can only even do this because he has to rely on technology. And it's not so much that he was anti-technology before, but he was very much like, we still have to have nature. But he still relies on effectively AI, on robots, machines. He has to rely on all these things to make all this work. And then the ultimate irony being at the end of the film is that he has to kind of like give the garden to a machine to look after, and it's, you know, that's like a super, like, you know, futurist idea, the idea of a garden that's like maintained by a robot and an android or whatever. And I kind of took like that is like, this robot is effectively becoming like, I don't want to say Jesus, but like the new Mother Nature. Like, this robot is now Mother Nature.
He's
for this garden,
taking care of the Garden of Eden.
Yes. Well, that's I mean, when you have
the caretaker of the Garden of Eden, much like Adam was supposed to be.
And when you just have one garden, like the comparison to Eden's kind of easy at that point. Like,
sure.
There's the only one left.
Plus, it's super bountiful, and it's got a bunch of melons and stuff that grow in it. It's got turtles and bunnies. I hope that's the one that survived.
I hope so too. Well, what I was thinking actually earlier on? See, when like he's first like taken over the ship and he's killed the others, and he starts eating like an apple or something. I was like, I have to assume that with 6 domes, that each one had like maybe different conditions for different types of produce, because obviously different.
Well, one of them seems to be just like pine trees and stuff like that.
Yeah, because obviously different fruit and things only grow in certain parts of the world because that's where the climate is appropriate for those
tropical
items. Yeah. So it makes sense that if he only has one dome left, he only has like one climate left, and therefore only a certain selection will grow there. So I was wondering, they never say it, but I was just wondering, what's left? Like, what is it? What fruit is he just like? What does he not have anymore because it's all gone?
Yeah.
I was curious.
Yeah, it's true.
But I like the irony of him having to rely on machines, and obviously him learning that he is kind of lonely. He still needs humanity. He does regret like killing the others. Like, he sees that as this thing he has to atone for, which leads to his sacrifice, where he kills himself at the end along with robot number 2, who's the injured one,
which I thought was dumb. Like, he murdered another robot.
Yeah, you couldn't let number 1 at least have some company whilst he was taking care of the garden.
Right. He's like, you, number 1, you're going to take care of this. Well, number 2, you're too broken. You're going to have to come with me because you can't tend to the garden anymore. But like, it's clearly a sentient life with emotions. Like, just let it live its life or let it decide itself if it wants to die.
Because they do this thing where the other humans, the other ship, has looked for him anyway, even though they knew that it was like risky and they might never find him. They put themselves in danger to come save him, which just kind of proves that even if the guys were kind of dickish at the start, humanity has a lot of good left in it, because these guys like went out of their way to try and save him. So he's left with this choice where it's like, well, they're going to want me to blow up the dome if they come here. So the only option I really have is to like sort of jettison that into space and blow up the ship so that they can't like take it away. So he does, and that's the end of the movie basically. And the final shots are, droid number 1 watering plants and just taking care of the garden.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the idea. I think he sees himself like he has to like die for what he's done. I think that's kind of like, if he has like a redemptive notion in him.
He's trying to atone for his sins.
Yes. I feel like there's more productive ways of atoning though than murdering yourself, but that's just me.
I would have taken the droid with me. I would have let the droid live.
Yeah, at the very least, yeah. There's also a problem, like, not too long before this part of the film, he notices the forest is starting to, like, die. Like, those, brown leaves are forming and stuff. And
Does
I'll
he
be
even
honest.
figure out why?
Yeah. There's a whole moment where when the ship talks to him again, when the guy in the Bridgerton or whatever it's called talks to him, he's like, hey, you're going to be going dark soon because you're getting on the other side of the planet, so we've got a limited window or something like that. And I'm like, and I was like, really? The botanist forgot that the green life needed sunlight? He forgot this? That feels like a pretty, even I knew that.
Maybe he needed a paleobotanist there.
So he whips out, and they've got lamps for this. Like, he whips out some sun lamps that'll do the job. It's not like he has to like turn it around and go back towards the sun to get.
No, I remember him saying at the end, "Don't worry, the lamps will, the lights will provide what the photosynthesis or whatever." It
almost like I felt there was going to be more made out of the fact that the forest was starting to die, and maybe that was like a punishment for him like doing this the wrong way, that he didn't deserve this beautiful forest because he'd done so many bad things. But again, I felt like the movie just kind of fixed it too quickly. Even though I did enjoy the idea that they're saying, hey, we're here to save you, and that was like a 1 in 1,000 chance, you should be thrilled. And all he can focus on is that he gave him the idea, they need sunlight. so he runs into the forest.
They came to save me, so I'm going to blow myself up.
Yeah, I also see it as like he can't escape his people. Like he tried to like go away and just be with the forest, but ultimately he was never going to be able to escape them. And
Yeah.
the irony being is that it's for a good reason, because they cared enough about him that they wanted to save him. Like, you know, that's a good thing. That's a, you know, that was like a heroic thing this other ship's done. I actually like this other ship more than I like him, because they're going out of their way to come and save him.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I'm distracted.
That's all right. This is kind of like if in The Martian Matt Damon was a prick, but the ship still wanted to come and rescue.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of what this is.
And then instead of like going out of his way to be rescued, he just blows himself up as soon as they get there. So they wasted the whole trip.
Yes, exactly. That's what this is, and in many ways.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, it's hard to get behind them, but I do appreciate them trying to have this like really flawed character with really murky motivations. I think when I said that I think there's kind of a positive message in there by the end, and I could see why, like the way they treat this character as being, see, the environmentalist is like the crazy one and we shouldn't listen to him. I do think that it does have an environmental message, but it's saying that the environment and technology are both valid, and I mean even environment, technology, and humans are all valid and all need to be balanced together. I think it's kind of the point of the ending.
I suppose I don't know if the Earth that mankind has created is necessarily like a pro-environmentalist message, though.
Oh no, the Earth isn't. No. I mean, I'm saying this movie has that.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, okay, well, I mean, arguably even the idea at the ending is that, well, you know what, humans had our chance with this and we messed it up, so now the robot gets to take care of the forest and the robot has it. And that's kind of ironic because it's a man-made thing with the natural life of things, but without the middle part, which is us.
Yeah. It does seem odd that there seems for humanity to just see zero value in nature in the future. I mean, and everybody seems fine with it. I guess maybe it's been so long that they just forgotten what it's like to have nature around.
I think that's what it is, and maybe, like, I wonder if this guy, Lowell, our main character here, I wonder if he, like, it seems to have been long enough that no one remembers it, so I have to imagine that he wasn't around when it was, like, properly there either, but he's kind of like a historian who like still studies something and like obsesses about it when everyone else has just kind of moved on. Like the world has moved on, and we don't get a lot of Earth. We never see Earth for a start, so we don't know. And part of that's because they just had no idea how to visualize. Like I guess just lots of concrete, maybe.
Yeah, it'd probably be a lot of like filming in new shopping malls, just like a lot of these are.
Yeah.
These 70 movies are like, we need a futuristic building. Go to the downtown shopping mall that was built last week. Swap out a couple of chairs and put everyone in jumpsuits.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it would be like. I mean, it doesn't sound like they can't go outside, but I'm wondering if it's maybe like when you've got like a colony on another planet where they can't breathe outside, so it's all just like indoor.
Yeah. Like
buildings that look kind of like space stations, but they're on a planet surface.
Yeah, kind of like what we see in WALL-E, maybe.
Yeah, a little bit like that. So I could see that, and obviously it's a really low budget movie. They did the best they could with what they had. I think for the most part it looks good. I will say one little transition thing annoyed me at the start. They do this thing where he's doing like dishes or he's preparing fruit at like the window, and it goes to a shot from the outside, and there's like a big American flag next to the window, and the camera starts to pull back, and it sort of fades and it pulls back, and then on the second time it fades though, it switches to a miniature where obviously it's the ship, so that's how they're doing it. But the problem I had is that where the window was, and what's weird is they did it properly later on, because later on what they did is they had a light, a square of light, just kind of like when you look at a building at night, you see like a square of light at the window. You don't necessarily see detail or inside, but you see just the at least a square of light. Here, it was just like, it was like the window just wasn't there, and it was just a flat surface, and it was really noticeable that he just disappeared when it switched to the shot of the miniature. And I'm not really complaining that they used a miniature. I love miniatures in this, but I felt like a little square of light would have done, or just switch to a different angle so that you don't see him. Like,
come on, 2001 special effects artist.
I know.
Should know better.
Douglas Trumbull.
Yeah. I really like the look of the film. I think it looks good. I like the miniature use. I like the look of the space station. You don't see too much of it. Actually, the outside of the space station does remind me of 2001. I think there's like one design that's used for, maybe it is the most practical design for traveling through deep space, but of just this like long tube with two balls at the end of it. That's just the most practical design. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it is very 2001.
This one was less phallic, though, I felt, in comparison to 2001.
I never really thought that one was phallic.
There's a lot of phallic. This one just feels a bit more industrial. And
yeah, I mean, it's got two weighted parts at the ends, and then like the tubing in the middle.
It's got the.
I don't know how else to describe it.
It's got basically the each end. It's got three domes, so it's got this kind of. I don't know.
Like a dumbbell shape. Maybe.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. So, no, I agree. The movie looks pretty decent. I think it follows a little bit when you think of the better examples, right? I mean, I don't think. I think it may have been like Siskel or someone who said something to the effect of "It's a poor man's 2001." And well, I think that's maybe a little harsh in the sense that the movie is worth discussion. I can get, if you're comparing it to the visual quality and like how Kubrick shot 2001 and how the sets and the effects look, yes, 2001 is a much more prestigious looking film.
Well, yeah, it's and plus it has that grandiose score of classical music that running through it.
But this has a theme song. This has a silent running theme song that it plays a few times.
Not my favorite.
Yeah, it's like a ballad.
I thought it was funny because it wasn't Joni Mitchell, but it was someone very Joni Mitchell-esque who, I mean, she would sing about, nature and preserving. She sang that Big Yellow Taxi song, which is about like putting trees in the museum and then paving all the forest over with parking lots, stuff like that. So she sounded very Joni Mitchell-esque to me.
Yeah. I mean, it kicks in a few times when we get the montages when he's doing stuff in the forest, or when he's socializing with the robots later in the film. Teaches them how to play cards. Because the thing, it doesn't do a lot of things early on to show that he likes being with people, because he kind of hates it most of the time. But he is actually quite good at poker, because he wins the hand we see them play, which suggests that he does at least get something out of that. Like, there is like some human interaction that he does, even if he's not admitted it or realized he needs it or enjoys it. Like, there is some hints of it early on, and that's what he tries to get the robots to replace later on, and to varying degrees of success, but ultimately it might never be the same. So
I was thinking that once the robot gets like a really good hand, that maybe he was thinking, oh no, now they know how to play and they're robots, so they're always going to play better than me, so now it's not worth playing anymore. Maybe I should have kept a human alive.
Yeah, he's just delighted with himself that not only did the robot had a good hand, he's delighted that he knew he had a good hand, so he bet appropriately. It
was a cute scene, actually.
Yeah, it's all right.
Not as cute as those bunnies.
The bunnies so cute. At the start of the movie, yes. There's some bunnies. There's a bird or two in there as well that was flying around.
Some snails, a turtle. We saw a turtle.
Yes. Yeah. I think ultimately the movie presents a lot of interesting ideas. I think ultimately its own messaging is a little murky to me, and I don't know if that's just because we can't excuse the idea that maybe us watching this now in the 2020s maybe not, like, some of the direct things that it's like paralleling might not spring to mind for us in the same way that it would have done had you seen this in 1972 when everything was like fresh and relevant and specifically what was going on at the time. Because I would say this is definitely more of a 70s movie, but you definitely get a little bit of that like leftover hippie vibe to some of the characters in this. I think this movie may have been greenlit in connection to Easy Rider. I think I read. This was like a broad thing. I don't want to, like, don't quote me on this, but there's some loose connection to like this sort of being born out of that existence. So
Maybe
yeah.
just the independent scene.
Probably, yeah. It's probably just the independent scene it's talking about. Because you know, the end of the 60s is the birth of independent cinema. And this is a $1 million movie, which even at the time is low budget, you know, especially for a science fiction film. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And it does well with its budget. It does. Like, you know,
The sets are great, I think.
yeah. Well, again, they're not really sets by and large. They're
No, I guess not.
the retrofitted U.S. aircraft carrier, which I think you can kind of tell in some. Obviously, the rec room's got a bit more to it because they've built like a circular pool table and shit. But when they're in, when he's in like the I guess we'll call it the bridge.
Yeah, the bridge area.
It looks like this just feels like a ship that's just been, you know, a few
And
more.
some TV monitors.
Yeah. They've put like a big radar thing where the window would be, like, you know, so. Yeah.
Lots of buttons that just flash a bunch of lights.
Yes.
Seemingly not for anything.
I'm sure they do something. They do something.
I'm sure they did something on the ship.
On the real ship, sure, but I'm sure they do something. There has to be a bunch of little systems that are controlled on a ship this big in space that need buttons.
Yeah. Flashing buttons all the time.
Yes. Well, they're flashing to let you know they're okay. When they stop flashing, you know something's wrong.
Interesting design.
Yeah,
I like the movie. I like the little Rainbow Road section too. There was one shot I really enjoyed, which was when the dome separated from the stations, and you can see it from like the exterior, and it looks very much like when you'd see like a shuttle separate in space.
Yeah,
and it's got like they use like sparkly things in it in the air too, so it looks really good. But they liked it so much they used it like 18 times. I actually thought that scene was a bit rough, just because like they keep showing Bruce Dern in one of the domes, and then they keep showing exterior shots of what looks like the same dome, like just you know, releasing and then exploding.
They could have done more to make
space.
the domes more distinct, so it was clear if like when he
Or
was
where
in a
they were
different
coming
one.
from, because I kept thinking, okay, is Bruce Dern in space now, or like you know what I mean, like separated now?
It was a little confusing because the domes kind of look the same, and it's probably because they basically had one dome that they just used for all of them.
Probably. Yeah, it was just it was very redundant, and I it wasn't very good at telling me like which one was blowing up and if they were in any danger, because it kept showing Bruce Dern inside one of the domes.
Yeah, I think the movie could have had a better script in the sense that I think there could have been a clear like goal or obstacle, and you know, because like I said, the forest kind of starts to die a little bit, but it's resolved pretty quickly, and it's not something that becomes this like problem that he's trying to solve for, like, you know, once he's separated and he's moved through the rings of Saturn, and he's kind of like presumed lost at that point. At least we think he has. Obviously he's not, because the ship shows up later. But once we're at that point in the movie, it is just kind of like becomes this drama of him getting used to being on his own. In fact, one thing we glossed over that I think we should mention is the quote unquote funeral for the one who was nice to him. So because the other guys blew up in a dome, but the one he killed with his hands is in the dome that's left, so he's still there. And I thought it was very notable and a good little bit of character work that he doesn't go there personally. He doesn't go into the dome. He gets the robots to dig the hole and ultimately put the body in the hole. But he does actually still like ask. He gets them to stop, and he says, "I want to say something first." And he gets a little emotional as he's watching on the monitor, and he's saying he's like, it's just like a bit of a poem or something, or a prayer. And what stuck out to me about this is that this is a very interesting dynamic for this character, in the sense that he's showing that he cares and that there's some attachment, but he's trying to keep himself distanced, and he's, you know, keeping it at arm's length.
Yeah, he's doing it remotely.
Yeah, by not going down there. So it's this nice conflicting thing where he feels something, but he's trying to like keep it separate from him so he doesn't feel as bad, or if maybe that'll make him feel better, or just like stay separate from humanity, right? And that's kind of his problem, is that he is more... I always hate to bring up comic book things, but it's a little bit Poison Ivy, okay? He cares more about plant life and wildlife than he does humans. And he's trying to like sort of keep that barrier up to make him... so he wouldn't have to feel bad. It doesn't work. Obviously, over the course of the film, he does think about them. He does care. And ultimately feels he has to sacrifice himself. So that his garden can live. But, yeah. So I think it's worth mentioning that scene, because I thought it was an interesting... just the motivations of everything he was doing, both like in how he was doing it remotely, but also felt like he needed to do it, was very... it was a good bit of storytelling in that particular sequence.
Yeah. I don't know if I got the vibe that he cares more about plants than he does humans. I think the biodome sort of represents something, not just the plants. It kind of represents, history and, man's like, I don't want to say hubris, but like, a time before man like destroyed everything, because it still has this one little preserved, perfect little forest with like, little bunnies running around and stuff like that. So it sort of represents, something that man has lost by its own selfishness and greed, most likely.
Yeah. You could... you almost have his own like selfish hubris in a way, with him going to these lengths to maintain this. Like, even if you agree with him, even if you like sympathize with what he's trying to do, like, there is kind of like, he does murder multiple people and decides that he is the one to like make this decision to keep this thing going.
I mean, I do think you're right about the first one being like just a crime of passion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he makes a last stand for sure, but I don't think he ever meant for it to escalate to murder, because he seems pretty like surprised when the guy doesn't wake up.
Yeah, he's in shock, but then he's like, well, I'm in deep now, so I might as well go all out. Yeah. I just kind of get that vibe to it. I mean, I don't know if the title, because the movie changed a lot. Like, I didn't do a lot of reading up on like other like examinations of the movie, but when I was having a quick scan of things, I noticed that the original pitch for this movie is that there actually would be aliens, and it was going to be more about like there wasn't an environmental side to it. It was more about this guy taking control of the ship, but then like the robots go down to meet aliens at the end of the film or something like that. It was very different.
Cool.
And the director changed it, and there was a new script written or whatever. But I actually forgot where I was going with that, but a good bit of trivia all the same.
I would like to see that movie still.
Yeah, it's still an interesting movie. It's yeah. There's a lot of really fascinating questions that are being brought up and explored. There's just, I think, a more... I don't want to say coherent, because it's not incoherent. That's not what I'm trying to say. But a more produced, well thought out, finished film, perhaps, from a scripting perspective, that just to make everything it's trying to say kind of ring home a bit better, and maybe a character that we can empathize with a little bit more. And whether that's a problem in the script or a problem just with Bruce Dern's performance, is it open for debate.
He could just be miscast, like we said earlier. Maybe he's just... we can't get the Burbs character out of our head or something. We're always going to see him as a little bit crazy.
Maybe. I mean, to be fair, I think he does act crazy in this. I don't think it's just other roles that we're bringing to the table here.
Yeah.
He does come off a bit unhinged, even when he's playing poker at the start. There's a little bit of an attitude to him. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that is there.
Kind of reminds me of Timothy something.
Dalton.
Timothy Carey. He was in some Kubrick films. He did Passive Glory and The Killing.
Okay.
It kind of reminds me of that. Just somebody who like speaks in a way where you automatically go, I don't know if I trust this person or like this person. I think they might be kind of shady or something else is going on up there where they're not like everything about them says they should be normal, but something about the way they talk comes off as red flag material.
Yeah. I think a lot of this movie does is really good science fiction topics. It's, the idea of someone being lonely, although in this case it's space instead of a post-apocalypse, but the idea of them befriending something like a robot, the idea of, everything changing and us losing this part of humanity, and this is the only part of, wildlife and, forestry that's left, and, all these ideas, and then the attitude of the characters who don't really care about it in the film and what that says, and what the movie's kind of exploring with these topics, is all fascinating stuff. It's all good stuff, which is why I say, I think talking about the movie is maybe a little bit more entertaining than actually watching all of the movie. I mean, and it's not that it's a long movie, it's 90 minutes. It goes in quite quick, honestly, all things considered. But, yeah. I would say it's a very flawed but worthwhile viewing experience.
Yeah.
But there's a reason why, almost every article, if you search for Silent Running on the internet, almost every article will start off by saying it's overlooked or underrated. And I'm like, I don't know if it is overlooked. I think it's looked at about the right amount versus the other things that deserve more time and attention. But maybe that's just me being shocking on the internet. I don't know. It's my hot take.
Maybe we're just too young. A couple young whippersnappers who don't understand the way that movies used to be.
I guarantee, every time we are not completely praising of an older movie, there's always someone who's clearly 20, 30 years older than us who'll get in the comments and you young people don't understand. You're just not smart
Science
enough to get it.
Science fiction used to be better. You need all the bang bangs in space. No.
Yeah, well, 2001 was before this, and it's a much better film. So shut up, is what I'm saying to these people.
The best film ever. Yep.
It's top 10. Top 10.
Best movie ever.
Top 10. So, what you gonna rate the movie?
Okay, I think I do think the movie's good, and there's a lot that I really like in it. My issues with the film, maybe it would go away if I watched it more, or if it was a movie I knew from an early age. I'm like, oh, this is a sci-fi movie that's got a really unique look and storytelling and characters, and if I had some sort of nostalgia to it, maybe I would like it more. But for a first time watch, I'm gonna give it a 6.5.
All right. Yeah, I think that's kind of where I landed last time I watched it. About a decade ago, probably. I don't think it's changed much. I think I'm probably in a similar vein.
It's okay. You can have the same rating as me.
Yeah, I always like to try and consider, do I want to go higher? Do I want to go lower? I think 6.5 sounds right. I think Tara nailed it this week.
Boom.
Yes.
That's why I'm here, because I'm always right.
That sentence in and of itself was wrong, so there's irony to it, so thank you. No. Yes, Tara's always right. Yes, I concur.
That's right.
Uh-huh. Yes. Is that a bird? I hear a bird. Bird chirping.
It's my notification from my cell phone, which is in another room. I guess I had the volume up kind of loud.
Yes. Look, are you in a biodome? Do we have to
I
do...
I wish I had birds. I love birds. I just don't like the idea of keeping an animal in a cage.
Do we have to do the movie called Biodome now, starring Pauly Shore?
I was thinking that, actually.
Oh, darn.
Yes.
I'm joking. I'm not...
That could be a bonus movie.
Well, someday.
Hell yeah.
Someday.
Pauly Shore.
Love
him.
When we reach $10,000 per month on Patreon, we will do Biodome as a bonus episode.
But it's a classic.
I've not seen it, but all signs point to... Oh boy.
Well, it's because you haven't seen it.
I don't think I'm going to like Pauly Shore, okay?
Wait, you've never seen any Pauly Shore movie?
I have delightfully avoided, as far as I know anyway, maybe he's had a small role in something, but as far as I know, I've not seen a Pauly Shore movie.
Never seen Encino Man?
Nope.
In the army now?
Never heard of it.
Well, after 70s month is over.
Oh dear. All right, well that is Silent Running, the 1972 film in the can. So I'm going to get Tara to pose for the thumbnail now. So yeah, very nice. Moving the mic out of the way. Professional. I love it. All right, 3, 2, 1, pause. I mean, not a lot of actual running in the film. I believe the title is referring more to like when a ship is being run with minimal.
Run silent, run deep.
Yes, minimal systems. Which at the end of the movie, the droid operating on this biodome on his own. That I would call that silent running, which is probably why the movie's called that. Although, yeah. So anyway, next episode will not be a movie review. This is the rare time we're not telling you what's next, because next time it will be each of us coming in with the top 25 sci-fi movies of the 1970s. Dang
it, I got homework.
Yeah. And of course, this is the third time we've done a 70s season now. The first one was actually a lot more movies. We went nuts with that first one and did like...
It was because Criterion came out with like their 70s sci-fi collection, and we were just like going through them.
But we did like 9 or 10 episodes in a month, which was insane. And
it was.
Yeah.
It was too much to ask from me.
It was your idea.
So well, I thought maybe we'd bank them.
But we've done a couple of 70s seasons at a regular pace, so we're pretty well equipped.
We still have so much more.
There is still more, right? There's enough for like another 3 seasons of 70s movies, so eventually we can do like a redo of the top 25. But it's been enough time now. We're 3 years out of the show. We want to do a top 25 of the 70s science fiction. So that's what we're going to do. So we'll each have our own list next episode, and we'll see what we picked. Obviously, movies that we've not reviewed yet that we've still seen will still be eligible. We're not going to ignore important films just because we haven't reviewed them yet. But that's maybe some of the differences between us might pop up the most. So
yes.
So we'll see. But that is what's coming up next. You can of course like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, and all that jazz. All of that helps us out a lot and helps share the show out to more people on YouTube. So please do hit the buttons. I will take this time to thank our Patreon producers for the month. So thank you to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Short, Board Now, Christopher Moy, and David Brown. You can of course be a producer at one of the higher tiers over at Patreon, which Tara is going to tell you more about right now.
That's right, Peter. If you enjoy our reviews, please check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/MildFuzzTV. And if you donate as low as $1 per month, you will get access to bonus episodes of The Ace. So if you're wondering where all your favorite sci-fi B-movie schlock that we clearly should be reviewing, well, maybe we have. And maybe it's on the Patreon. So check out what we think of the Transfer Saga on there. Lots of Full Moon Production stuff, lots of David Carradine Gold.
At least 2 Red Brown movies who was mentioned earlier in this episode.
We love our Red Brown, yes. If we can somehow figure out how Captain America fits into science fiction, we might do those.
We still haven't actually done Space Mutiny, but we did do both Robo War and Your Hunter of the Future.
Yeah, we do need to do Space Mutiny eventually. Although I think we sort of reviewed the film as like an add-on to one of our early reviews.
Yeah,
back when we would watch Mystery Science Theater.
Yeah, we kind of did that. Yeah, someday when time has moved on and we've forgotten everything we said.
I mean, I'll never forget Space Mutiny. I've seen it like 100 times.
Well, that's because you have an unhealthy relationship with Space Mutiny.
Yes.
And well, Mystery Science Theater in general, if we're honest. So
and Riff Tracks.
And that's by extension.
I have both versions. Yes.
Of course. So Yes, I look forward to that. And also worth mentioning, this month, Screams After Midnight, the bonus episodes return, so you're also getting a bonus episode of Screams now as well for that $1 on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, so go and have a look. We just did Werewolves Within as a bonus episode, so go check it out.
Speaking of Sam Richardson.
There you go. But there you go. That's the show. Catch us on the Twitters at Screams Midnight, which is now the Mailed Fuzz Movies Twitter in general, which covers both Screams and Ace. So go and check out the Twitter. And that's us. So hopefully you've enjoyed this 70th season, which I guess the finale of which is the top 25 next time. But we'll see you then. So keep watching science fiction and computer. Add salsa.